This is the Ballroom State of Mind podcast, episode 123, The Life Cycle of Relationships. Hey, welcome to the podcast today, my friends. This is episode 123. I'm always astounded that I'm still going. I had a client today who said, Amber, are you still going to do your podcast? And I said, yes, I am. I'm here. I'm doing it. I know it's been a little bit more spaced out lately, but I'm still here. I'm still going, and I don't have any plans to stop with the podcast. So she also asked about what my plans are for my program. So I'm going to give you a little teaser here. Rather than doing the private coaching that I've been doing for the last 5 years, I'm going to be moving into sort of like a group or like a membership situation. Okay. And I'm super excited about it because it's going to be really affordable. It's going to be a pretty low monthly cost for coaching and lots of resources, monthly workshops, and like a community aspect that I'm so excited about. I know that when I go to competitions personally, I'm so excited to see you guys. I'm so excited to get to connect with my dance friends. And the ballroom world, and even just like partner dancing world in general, not everybody in your life does that thing. So it's really fun when you can be around the people who understand your hobby and understand all the hard work that you put in and how dedicated that you are. And I love being able to go to a competition also and connect with friends that are not in my studio. I love my studio and I love traveling with them, of course, but sometimes it's also just nice to build a community around you and have other people that you get to see when you go and travel to your competitions and whatnot. So I'm really excited about the community piece and I'm looking forward to it. And if you want information, you got to get on the wait list. Okay. So I'm going to be sending emails and stuff about that. And you can go to my website, amberhader.com, go to the ballroom coaching page, and down at the bottom, there's a button that you click that says join the wait list. And there's a few places on my website that say join the wait list. But I was just looking at it and sometimes they're a little bit hard to find. So I need to have my web designer put one on the front page at the top, but go to my website, amberhader.com, and get on the wait list so that you don't miss anything about that. All right. Now let's get into the podcast today. I'm calling this one the life cycle of a relationship. And I want to preface this whole episode by saying I have had so many clients come to me in sessions and tell me about their wonderful teachers, their wonderful relationships, and how appreciative they are of that, the wonderful connections that they make with their teachers. And there are lots of really beautiful, healthy, dynamic dance relationships out there. Okay. Now, when they come to those sessions, they don't really want to talk about that because it's not a problem. But I have had many clients also come to me and talk to me about problematic partnerships and problematic teachers. And it can also go both ways, by the way. So I want to say that too. I'm going to be talking in this podcast mostly from the perspective as a student with a teacher partner, which is what my situation is and what most of my clients are. But certainly I've had friends who are also teachers and people that I know who are teachers, instructors, whatnot, coaches, who have had students who are problematic and difficult and have strained relationships with them. So it goes both ways. And so in no way, shape, or form am I like doing this podcast and saying the teachers are bad. That's not what we're doing here. Okay. So I want to make sure it doesn't come off that way. But what I really just want to talk about is relationships in general. And I'm going to be speaking to like problematic relationships. Okay. Or unhealthy dynamics in relationships. But don't hear me saying teachers are bad. I don't think that. Okay. Where this kind of came about was I was talking with one of my clients and she was telling me about her relationship with her teacher and how it had developed over time. And she was recounting how it had all evolved and was expressing sort of some disappointment and some disillusionment, you could say, about how like maybe she was set up like sort of a bait and switch, right? Where you present one way, but then down the road it changes and it's not the same. And you sort of don't know how you got here. And it isn't how you started and it's not what she wanted and it's not what she expected. And she said, if I had known how I was going to be treated or how this was going to go, I don't think I would have lasted this long. I don't think I would have stuck around. And what she had said was, I wish someone would have warned me that this is how the dance relationships work. And I thought, oh, this is so fascinating. And I said, let me just tell you, this is how all relationships work. And I'll give you the pattern for like how all relationships work. And then I just like spat something out. And that is what it started this podcast. So I'm calling it the life cycle of relationships. And so I've created some guideposts along the way, kind of things to look for. I was looking online for something linear, like steps or whatever, and I didn't find anything that I super loved. So I made this up in my head. But these things that I'm going to give you, there's 5 of them that we could call stages, but they're not really linear, and they sometimes overlap, and sometimes we cycle back into them. So they're not really stages exactly, but they are guideposts that I want to give you as a frame of reference. So use this as a loose guide. And as always with all my podcasts, please take what helps you. Please take what resonates with you. And if something doesn't resonate with you, leave it. Okay. I don't expect you to listen to everything I say or resonate with everything that I say, but take what works for you, take what resonates, and leave the rest. Okay. So let's get into these. I'm going to call them stages, but there's 5 sort of guideposts I want to give you. So the first one is when you first get to know somebody, I'm going to call this just the honeymoon stage. When you first meet people, okay, it's the honeymoon stage. And some resources that I found called it euphoria, but it's generally positive and good, right? We're on our best behavior in the honeymoon stage. We're usually withholding the negative aspects of ourselves, the less desirable qualities that we have. We might be concealing some of our dysfunctional patterns. And in the name of creating a connection, we're withholding some of that stuff and presenting the best version of ourselves. Another aspect of this stage is there's lots of getting to know each other, which our brain really likes because there's lots of questions being asked, and your partner will be asking questions about you. And this is very validating to the ego because it's, oh, they want to get to know me. And we get these dopamine hits from just the novelty of this relationship, that this is a new person and there's things I don't know about them. And oh my gosh, they want to get to know me and they're showing me attention. And there's a lot we don't know about each other. So I'm learning a lot and it's very stimulating and it's very interesting. Unlike the long-term relationships that we have, that we might have had for decades, where we've learned all that. We know everything about everybody and we're not surprised very often. So our brain gets real lit up when we meet new people and we get to know them and they're trying to get to know us. In the honeymoon stage, we also forgive a lot. And a lot of times it's like everything. Like we might forgive everything and look the other way and kind of shelf things that happen or things that are said, because in the name of connection, our brain is designed to do that. You are biologically programmed to this extent that you will bond better if you forgive a lot. So your brain chemistry actually prioritizes bonding. It releases chemicals and hormones like oxytocin and vasopressin that help you bond. Okay. And they help you create attachments. And that's intentional because it's really good for us in our survival to be in a group and to be connected. So when we're first getting to know somebody, don't beat yourself up if you've let some things slide because sort of in the name of making this connection. Okay. We are suspending negative judgment during this time. And that's what allows you to form attachments. In the honeymoon stage, you're going to have your own ideas and expectations about what this is. And your teacher, either side of this partnership, is going to have those expectations and how it's going to go and how it's going to progress. And we rarely actually talk about this. Like we don't talk about our expectations. We just make up a story in our head and they make up a story in their head, as humans do, as brains do. And then we move forward. And you have expectations about how you think this person should show up. And they might have expectations of you. And we have ideas about how people should behave. And those expectations are set up from the beginning. And especially in the beginning, we'll create a romanticized story about it and a romanticized story about this other person. Again, in the name of attachment and bonding. Okay. So that's stage 1, honeymoon. Now we start to move out of honeymoon and into a phase called unmasking. And unmasking is where we've been probably spending time in the honeymoon period where we are on our best behavior. And when that's not naturally how we are all the time, it gets pretty exhausting and we get tired of putting on the front. And so our mask starts to slip. This is when we start to become more comfortable with one another. We've been together long enough that we've invested a little bit in this relationship. And we subconsciously understand that we've both invested enough that it's probably okay that I let my guard down, or it's probably okay that some of my less desirable qualities are going to show. So some of our flaws start to slip out on both sides. And we sort of might, in these moments, kind of question it, but we'll still continue to move forward often. It's usually not intentional that our mask drops. It's subconscious because it is just tiring to keep up a front, right? But sometimes it is. Sometimes there are people who put on a front and they act a certain way and they behave in the best ways that they know how to keep you here and to help you attach. And then when they feel like they got you attached, then they start to like really mistreat you. And that does happen intentionally for some people. So be aware of that. You might have doubts start to surface during this phase because they're starting to show a different version of themselves. And so are you. We're more comfortable with each other. We might be more emotional. We might be more volatile, but this is characteristic of this phase. And in this phase, we might be quick to dismiss some of it because we're fresh out of the honeymoon stage and we remember the good times in the beginning and we remember how this person was in the beginning and how like good it felt from all those chemicals being released and all of that newness and novelty and excitement. And so when the mask starts to slip and there's like these less desirable things that start to happen, we tend to dismiss it. And we want to maintain the story that we created. The brain creates a story and then it wants to create or find all the evidence that supports that story. So you have this romanticized story. And so anything that doesn't fit that story, it will dismiss and it'll call it an anomaly. Oh, that's not how they really are. The person that they really are is the one that I met in the beginning, right? So that version that we had in the beginning is what prevails for a time. The unmasking can be a little bit revealing because if someone is actually working really hard to put on a front and working really hard to appear as a good fit, then the more likely and more often the mask is going to drop. So what I mean is their behavior is going to be more inconsistent if it was an act. And again, it might have been a subconscious act, but if they were really putting on an act, then that mask is going to slip more often and their behavior is going to be more inconsistent. Whereas in a healthy or secure person or relationship, their character is going to be mostly reliable. Like we're not always on our best behavior all the time and we're human. Like we all have our moments, but we're not going to be having to convince ourselves that this is better than it is. We're not going to have to tell ourselves, oh, they probably didn't mean that. But the question is like, how frequently are we making those excuses or how frequently are we questioning this? Is their behavior consistent? That's a really good tell about what we're dealing with here. Or is it really unpredictable? Sometimes they're good to us and kind to us and supportive, and sometimes they're not, really terrible to us at times. And if that inconsistency exists, then I would really question it. Okay. So this kind of happens simultaneously with the next stage, which is what I'm calling the crossroads. When the unmasking is happening, we have these moments, and those moments are the crossroads. These are moments where there's something that happens or something that's said, and it might not be consistent with what we want. It doesn't have to be super terrible. It doesn't have to be abusive, though sometimes it is emotionally abusive in many of the clients that I meet with, okay? But when these undesirable things happen or things that just don't align with who we are or what we want in our life, these are crossroads. These are the moments where we get to make a choice. And we don't always know we're making a choice, but the crossroads happen and people are saying things and doing things. And I want to state here that pay attention to behavior because behavior will tell the truth. People will say all kinds of things, but what do they actually do? And I think these crossroads are really interesting because when something happens that doesn't feel good to you, what do? You're making a choice in that moment, although I hate to say that because there's a lot of factors that go into why you respond in the ways that you do. But I do think most of us in these moments, when something's happening we don't like, I think most of us will give people the benefit of the doubt. And we're going to hold space for people to be human. We know that we aren't always at our best. And so others won't be either. And generally, this is good. This is how society functions. And as a person who I want to be, I do generally want to give people the benefit of the doubt to an extent. And I don't want to call somebody on every single behavior because then I'm trying to control them. But we are always, at least subconsciously, weighing this out in these moments. What am I going to do about that? Or should I say something about that? Or should I do something about that? Or for me, it just sometimes feels like a little flag went up. Pay attention to this. And I don't address those things in the moment. I just go, oh, that's weird. That's interesting. Or I don't really like that. Or I didn't really feel good. I'm going to keep an eye on that. And I put it in my back pocket. And if it's going to continue, then I'm going to have to decide about this pattern, what I want to do about it. But in those moments, I'm not going to address it all the time, right? But how often are you telling yourself in those crossroads moments that, oh, they didn't mean that? Or how often are you tolerating something that you don't like or you don't want? Okay. And maybe ask yourselves, why am I tolerating that? This is when undesirable behaviors start to show up, things that are said or done that we're not comfortable with, that just don't feel good to us, even if we can't explain it. And often these behaviors will persist. A pattern starts to develop. And the question for you is, will you address it? And this is what the crossroads feels like. And if you don't address it, on some level, we're saying that it's okay. We're saying that we're going to allow that. Or we're saying, even if we don't think it's okay, we're going to tolerate it. I'm not going to do anything about it. And if we're not going to do anything about it, then there's no real consequence for that behavior. And instead, what we do is we adapt to it, and we adapt to one another. And when we adapt to that, and we stay in situations with people that we just don't like their behavior sometimes, it just sends the message that that kind of behavior is okay. I'm not walking away, so that means I'm choosing to stay. And I'm not setting a boundary around it, so they're not being told that's not okay. So that's an option. Or are we going to address it sometimes, but it's not changing? Like sometimes we address it and we go, oh, that's not okay with me. That's not going to work for me. And they go, oh yeah, of course, I will do X, Y, Z. And then they might do it for a little while, but then over time we come back to where we are. So they're not really changing. They're changing to appease you temporarily, or they're changing to let you believe that they're going to change. And even sometimes I think they really want to, but over time, the behavior will tell the truth. Okay. And again, this goes both ways. Students can be this way. You can be this way towards your teachers. Okay. This is not villainizing teachers. Okay. So in the crossroads, we are determining what we're willing to tolerate in one another or not. And in this phase, it's important to note we are invested at this point. Like we've gone through the honeymoon stage, and the unmasking has kind of been happening probably for a while. And we've invested a lot of time and effort and energy, and we're invested and we're attached and we've bonded to some degree. And we don't want to sometimes lose out on that. There's a sunk cost. If I decided to leave, if I decided to find another teacher, if I decided to find another opportunity, I might be telling myself that I'm going to be like starting over. So we might stay in situations longer than we should. The crossroads can also feel a little bit like a power struggle, depending on how much boundary setting you're doing. Now, I want to talk for a minute about teaching people how to treat us. And this is a thing that we hear a lot. Like, we teach people how to treat us. And this is true to an extent, but sometimes I don't like this saying, because I think there's a sense that we're faulting the recipient of the behavior that we don't like. So if I'm like with a teacher or whatever, and they're putting me down or they're yelling at me and I don't do anything about it, and we say, well, you teach people how to treat us, it's like it puts the onus on us, right? To like, we should have addressed it. And I low-key hate that. I mean, it's true, but it's also like, well, or people could stop doing that, because if somebody didn't do the negative thing in the first place, I wouldn't have to address it. And when they yell at you or they lie about something and you should have done X, Y, Z in that moment, I'm like, no, I want you to do X, Y, Z in that moment, or I want you to address it or whatever for your own sake. But there's a lot of reasons we might not address it in that moment. And I want you to know this, because we teach people how to treat us, but there's a lot of times that we don't do something in the moment for a lot of different reasons. And so we can't totally put the onus on us. But one of the things about, especially the teacher student dynamic, is that it is not an equal amount of power distribution. There is a power differential. We have made this person an authority in our life. And so we don't always feel like we can speak up. We don't always feel like we can address things. We don't always feel like we want to stand up for ourselves or say something. And sometimes we do, but because there's this power differential, then still the authority figure in the relationship can still say things and do things that kind of dismiss what you're bringing up, because they are the one with a little bit more power, so to speak. So we might just not feel comfortable doing that. People don't always have equal control over how they're treated. Also, we don't always know that we're making choices in those moments. We don't always realize what we're tolerating until we really feel the negative effects of that. And if that person that you're with is literally manipulative or literally toxic, they will literally manipulate you into foregoing your own needs, foregoing your own desires to get you to do what they want you to do. And so if you are intentionally being manipulated, like, we're not all able to see that in the moment, and we're not all able to set boundaries around that. So don't be so hard on yourself if at these crossroads, you haven't had strong boundaries. Okay. You're not teaching the toxic people in your life how to treat you exactly. They just treat people how they treat them. They go around being themselves, whatever that is. They aren't picky. Okay. They're going to treat you the way they're going to treat you. And that's on them and how they've been raised and the experiences they've had. Our work to do is to teach yourself how you are going to handle yourself and how you are going to treat yourself. And when things are happening that you don't like, that don't feel good to you, then our work to do is to teach ourselves how to treat ourselves, if that makes sense. It's to work on your self-respect. It's to work on your self-regard and your self-love and be like, I don't really want to be in situations where I'm being treated this way because I care about myself too much. That's your work to do. Okay. We're not going to try to control the way people treat us. We're not going to try to, like, if we have to set a lot of boundaries around somebody, that's a problem. Okay. That means they're crossing boundaries. That means they might be trampling on our needs, our wants, our desires. And so we have to set a lot of boundaries. If we have to stand up for ourselves a lot, this is a problem. Okay. This is your sign. Now let's talk about the next phase. So this, again, these all kind of blend, but this one I'm calling adaptation. And it's part of, like, the unmasking is happening and there's these moments of crossroads and we're making these micro decisions and we're adapting. So when we reach the adaptation phase, it's like we've settled into a dynamic, whatever this dynamic is. It might be a good dynamic in positive, healthy relationships. It might be a negative dynamic. It can be a volatile dynamic. It looks all different ways. But by this point, we're settling into patterns. We know if I say this to them, they're probably going to respond this way. And if I ask for this, they're probably going to respond in this way. And I've had clients come to my sessions and say, well, I know when this happens that he's going to yell at me. Like, we know. Okay. So you've settled into this dynamic. You've settled into your patterns with both your behavior and your partner's behavior. And you know how you both handle challenges. Okay. And so we've adapted. Now, I do want to say here too, that relationships are very complicated and dynamics are complicated. And you can have a relationship with somebody where it's just not good for you. It's just not a good dynamic. The way that we respond to each other is just not good. It's like puzzle pieces that don't fit. And so we can have people in our life who it's just not a good dynamic. And then we can have other relationships in our life where it's very easy to be ourselves and it's very easy to be in a relationship with them. And it's not toxic to us. So keep that in mind, that if a relationship is not good, if a relationship is unhealthy, if it's just not good and you need to leave it, we don't have to place blame. We don't have to shame and blame everybody or any of that. It can just be, you know what, this just isn't a good fit. Okay. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later. But let's stay on track, Amber. Let's stay on track. So this stage of adaptation is usually where we're going to adhere to boundaries or not. Okay. So the boundary setting is going to be there or not. And we're deciding what's a deal breaker or not. And then we're just going with it. One question I would ask you in this phase is, are both people adapting, or is one person mostly adapting to the other? Right. So are they adapting or are only you? Here's some more questions. Is this adaptation detrimental to me in some way? Is it conducive to my well-being? Am I compromising my values in any way? If this was not, this is such a good question. If this was not a dance relationship, but if this was a work relationship, a friend, or like a romantic relationship, would you allow this to persist? Would you stay? Sometimes we adapt to these dynamics out of habit or out of fear, or even out of hope that things will improve. But ask yourself, would I still spend effort on this relationship if this situation was actually different? If this was like a friend, And sometimes I think, man, if this was my friend, I don't think I'd hang out with them very much, right? Like, ask yourself this question. Does this partnership feel good to me? Does it feel reciprocal? Or do I feel like I'm giving more than I'm getting? Do I feel like I'm being extracted from? This is a question I ask myself a lot, is do I feel like I'm being extracted from? Because I am a giver and I do accommodate people a lot, but sometimes I feel like people are taking from me, like they're extracting from me. And it feels a little bit against my own will. Even though I might be agreeing to something, it feels against my own will. And so I'm always checking that feeling, checking with myself. Do you like the way they're talking to you? Do you like the way they're treating you? Do you like the way that they're handling you? Now, the last stage that I'm going to give you is the decision stage. Okay. And this is usually coming up when it's like, it's not really good for us anymore. And we don't know how much we can handle this. And we're pretty much done. Okay. In the decision stage, on the positive end of the spectrum, the decision stage, it looks like this is, I'm in it. I'm in it for the long haul. And then on the negative side, it might be time to go. So in the decision stage, we're deciding, is this relationship worth maintaining? Is this relationship suitable? And is it healthy for me in the long term? And this is a very important point. Your brain has the ability to talk you into anything. It can justify things. It can look for evidence for anything. Think about a debate team, people who are debating a subject. You can give them two sides of the argument. They both can find evidence to support their argument. And your brain can do this. So you can't always trust your brain. You can't always trust that something is quote unquote logical, because you can logic your way into any story. So I like to go into my body, and I recommend my clients go into the body, because your brain can get really confusing. So in these situations, especially these relationships and how they feel, what is your body telling you? Because your body knows. How do you feel around them? And with the dancing, you need to separate the dancing out, because you might love the dancing, and the dancing is going to create a lot of feel-good chemicals for you, and you're going to associate that with them. And if you separate out the dancing, I know you love dancing. I know it's important to you. I know you have a lot of emotional experiences with the dancing. Separate that out and focus on just the relationship. How does it feel in your body? You can feel drained by their negativity or their criticism, even if you love dancing with them. So do I feel good? Do I feel good about myself? Do I feel uplifted? Do I feel edified? Do I feel supported, encouraged? Your body will tell the truth. So when your brain is confused, ask your body. So in a healthy relationship, healthy relationships have healthy dynamics, which doesn't always mean it's rainbows and daisies. You might have issues, but you know how to address them, and you have an overall understanding of each other and your needs and how to adjust reciprocally, both of us. And again, it doesn't always look mature. We're not always being our best self. We can go through cycles and have issues, like I said, but overall, it's reciprocal. Overall, it's balanced. Overall, there's consideration for both parties. I'm considering my partner's needs. They're considering mine. Both parties will make sacrifices at times. Both people need to consider the other person's experience. And sometimes we get what we want, and sometimes they get what they want when we don't agree. And it's balanced. It's even, it's reciprocal. There's give and take. Can we be honest? In a healthy relationship, we can be honest. And honest can be kind. Honest doesn't have to be harsh or like pointed or direct, but can you be honest? Can you work through things? Do you feel heard equally? Is it safe to bring up a grievance? Do I feel safe that I can bring this up with you? Or do I feel like I'm going to get shut down, dismissed? You're going to defensive, attack me? In a healthy relationship, it's safe to bring a grievance, and we can work through it. We don't have to go into shame or blame, right? We can just work through it. We're not perfect at this because we're human. But overall, how do you feel? Does it overall feel good most of the time? Most of the time, does it feel supportive? Most of the time, does it feel positive, edifying, and expansive? Now, on an unhealthy side, it might look more one-sided. Like, I'm getting the short end of the stick here most of the time. I'm feeling like mostly what I want is actually not coming to fruition. That's weird. Are your feelings being dismissed, or your needs being dismissed? Are you being talked out of what you want, talked out of your needs? This looks like gaslighting. You're explaining your experience and they're telling you why it's wrong or why that didn't happen or why you're being too sensitive. So are your needs getting dismissed? Are they denying your experience? Are they talking you out of your experience, trying to convince you that's not what happened? In unhealthy relationships, what we say often does not match how we behave, or it's very inconsistent, right? Like in healthy relationships, what we say and do are more in alignment more of the time. Unhealthy relationships look like game playing. And some of you are doing this when you're being passive aggressive. If you do a lot of hinting, like you want people to guess what you're feeling, you want people to guess, and you're behaving in ways that, or speaking in tones, or like stonewalling to get them to behave or respond to you in a certain way, you're playing a game. And this is not a healthy dynamic. Okay. It's a more immature way to try to communicate. So if you're playing games, if you're passive aggressive, if there's avoidance or ghosting, silent treatment, stonewalling, defensiveness, okay, these are not really healthy relationship dynamics. In unhealthy relationships, one or both parties are kind of unreliable. I can't rely on you. I can't depend on how you're going to show up for me. I don't know if you've got me, actually. It's going to feel more like resentment. It's going to feel like disillusionment. It might feel like resignation or giving up. Or sometimes you just feel small and you can't quite put your finger on it. But if you're feeling small, if you're feeling less than, this is probably not a healthy relationship. Secure, reliable people who want to be in a relationship with others are also willing to hear out what the other person needs because they value that relationship and they want this relationship to be mutually beneficial. We want each other to be happy. We want each other to want to be here. And I gotta say, it's okay if we just aren't a match. It's okay if one or both people just aren't going to be able to provide what we need. And sometimes it's at one time they did, but they don't anymore. And so it might make sense to move on. Relationships sometimes are just complete. They're just done. And there doesn't have to be a blow up. There doesn't have to be an earth-shattering thing that made us break up or made us decide to move on. It can just be complete. It served its purpose. I used to see this with my daughter, especially when she was in high school, and especially the year she was graduating. Her and her friends were always getting in fights. And it was this interesting thing because it was like, I could see like, oh, their relationships are ending because they're going to be graduating from high school. They're going to be moving on and they're not going to continue in the same way. Most of these girls are probably not going to really ever talk to each other again. So it's like their subconscious is creating a reason to break up, a reason to complete the relationship. And so they would fight over things. And also there was this piece where they didn't have to invest in the relationship anymore because it wasn't probably going to continue. And so when they would get in a fight or they would have conflict, there was less desire to make it better because they weren't going to see each other anymore. So be aware of that you might be in a relationship that's done, that's complete, that served its purpose. And your brain might be looking for a reason to be mad and looking for a reason to be upset and looking for a reason to make an exit. And that's actually just not even necessary. It's okay to just be done. Okay. Now, nobody's perfect. And so I, for myself, always decide that there's probably at least like 10% of a person that is going to be a problem for me in some way, right? It's going to annoy me or I don't like it or it's not in alignment with who I want to be. And everybody, you're going to find some percentage of that. And the question you got to ask yourself is, are you willing to tolerate that undesirable part? Sort of like a pick your poison situation. It doesn't even have to be super negative. It doesn't have to be abusive. It can just be stuff that's just like not preferable to me. Like that's just not what I want to have in my life or surround myself with. And I'm not judging you and I'm not putting you down. It's just like, this doesn't resonate with me. Like we don't connect or whatever. Like it doesn't have to be earth shattering, but you're always choosing what is that percentage that's not my favorite that I'm willing to tolerate. And in some people that's easier than others, whatever their 10% is. Okay. Do you know that you don't have to have a good reason? Speaking like my daughter's situation, you don't have to have a good reason or even a valid reason. It can just be that I just don't feel like doing this anymore. My heart's not in it anymore. Like, that's a good enough reason. It just doesn't feel good to me is a good reason. Okay. Probably all of you listening are at different parts of this kind of life cycle. And again, it's not concrete. It's not linear. You can go through phases. You can go through cycles. Some of these are overlapping and they might come and go. And perhaps the honeymoon is over and the unmasking has happened long ago. And you're in the midst of the crossroads or you are well into the adaptation phase and you're feeling yourself at a decision point. I want you to know that it doesn't matter where you are in this process. Every day, you're going to have a crossroad. Okay. The crossroads never end. So you're going to have a crossroad and something's going to happen. And you've seen it happen before, or they've said that before, or they've done that before. And you will now have the opportunity, because you see it, to decide if you're going to accept it or not. And it doesn't matter how many times you've accepted it before. It doesn't matter how many times you've let it slide. But once you recognize that there's a pattern and it's not conducive to what you want, you now have more power to make a choice that aligns with your well-being. Like if they yell at you, if they talk down to you, if they dismiss your feelings, if they talk you out of your experience, if your relationship has a lot of fear, guilt, manipulation, or anything along those lines, you can always make a new choice. We don't have to be mad about it. We don't have to be indignant. We don't have to make them understand. We don't have to try to convince them of anything. We don't even have to have anybody agree with what happened. We don't even really need anybody else to validate it for us. Okay. It doesn't matter how long you've accepted and allowed stuff that you don't want. You can change your mind. You can change your mind today. Okay. Now, I can't tell you what's right for you. And only you can make those decisions about who you surround yourself with. And I always tell the people in my life, even when they're in relationships I don't see are healthy for them, I say, I love you either way. And I'm going to love you no matter what you decide. And I'm not going to judge you if you decide to stay with this person. And I will help you in the best ways that I can if you decide that you want to stay. And when I coach my clients, I don't tell them to stay or go. They make those decisions and they know what's best for them. But I do want to tell you what I see. And I want you to make informed decisions for yourself. And I do want the people that I care about to be surrounded by only the best people. I want you to be surrounded by kind and caring and empathetic people and authentic people and encouraging people who are enthusiastic about you and what you can create in your life. And they do hold you accountable at times. But they see you and they see your potential and they want to help bring out the best in you and they just love on you. And I want those people in your life. I want those people in your life to bring it out of you. Okay. So we can't always control how other people act. And I wish they would always behave in the best ways all the time, but they don't. So then we have to make choices about what we accept and how we're going to respond. So if you have a wonderful, supportive teacher, of which there are many, countless, count yourself lucky. Please thank them. Please go to your next lesson, your next coaching session with them, or text them, or whatever you do, call them and just say, thank you so much for being such a good teacher, being such a good person. And I appreciate you so much. And I'm so grateful to have you in my life. So please do not hesitate to love on those teachers who are doing so well for you. Okay. I love you guys. Catch you next time.